Hello, everyone. I'm really happy and excited to be here. And so my talk is going to be on why Africa needs fossil fuels, why fossil fuels for Africa, because that's my theme, fossil fuels for Africa. So most people don't realize that the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin technology and energy can't work. Like the Bitcoin can't work minus energy. We need lots of energy, be it for Bitcoin, be it for development, be it for heating, transportation, everything. So the energy industry powers every other industry. It runs every other industry. And despite what you might be hearing from mainstream media is saying renewable energy, solar and wind are doing very well. But in reality, it's the other way around. You realize that over 82% of our total energy is coming from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, majorly coal, oil, and natural gas. So 80 to 83% of our energy from that. And if you look at our energy, Africa energy outlook, like our energy consumption and production, all of that, you realize that we are very, very poor. So in sub-Saharan Africa, about 49 countries, 90% of our energy is coming from burning biomass. Biomass is firewood, charcoal, and cow dung. So that's what people are using. And 2.6, out of the 2.6 people, billion people who don't have access to clean cooking, 50% are in Africa, over 50% actually. So this is the energy used per person, and as you can see, the US is at 79,000 kilowatt hours, 79,000 units. And a person in Burkina Faso that the UN climate change department is glorifying for reducing the emissions is very low, like it's very, very low, below 300 kilowatt hours. So most people don't realize that there is a difference between electricity and, like, electricity is just a bit of the total energy consumption. At the end of the day, it's about 18% globally. So most of our energy is coming from, is in another form, maybe heating, transportation, not just electricity. Electricity is just a tiny part. So Africa has got 18% of the world population, 1.4 billion people, but we are using 4% of the total electricity consumption. 4%. That's very, very minute. And out of 660 million people, out of 759 million people globally without electricity, Africa has got 87%, almost 90% of those people. And half of our population lack electricity. So that's Africa at night. You can see Africa at night and the other continents. We are a poor nation. We don't have electricity. We don't have lighting at night. That's really sad. So I love these four statistics because they drive home the point that Africa, like, we are an energy poor continent. So point number one is today an average African consumes the amount of energy a person in Germany or France was consuming in 1860. And even if we multiply that by 10 times, we're going to be at the amount of energy a person in France or Germany was using in 1970. So, like, we are very many years far behind. Point number two, an average American consumes about the same amount of energy in 19 days that a person in Africa consumes in a whole year. In 2015, a person in the US was consuming, like in 1 week, a person in the US was consuming the amount of energy a person in Nigeria was consuming for 1 year, or what a person in Uganda was consuming for 2 years. So the last point, an American refrigerator uses about 500 kilowatt hours per year. An African uses about 200 kilowatt hours per year. To drive that point home, I come from a family whereby we are 6 people consuming. My dad complains when we use over 20 kilowatt hours per month. So that's 20 units. In a year, 6 people, we are consuming about 200 kilowatt hours. An American refrigerator, 500 kilowatt hours. And a person in America is consuming 13,000 kilowatt hours. So imagine when somebody in the West comes here and starts preaching to us about, saving energy or renewables. It's crazy. This is the amount of oil used per day, and that's me, and I love that particular t-shirt because it's fossil fuels for Africa. So as much as the West is telling Africans not to consume their own oil, the resources that we have in plenty beneath our feet, you realize that Africans are very poor. Like, we consume 1.4 billion people. So as I said, 18% of the total population. We're consuming 3.9 million barrels of oil per day. 3.9. A person in the US is consuming, so 330 million people in the US, they are consuming 20 million barrels of oil per day. It's so ironical. So these people, and Europeans, look at the Europeans. So these are the people telling us not to use fossil fuels. And they're bribing our youths to say, climate action, climate emergency. So most people don't realize that we are a fossil fuel civilization. As much as people are saying, let's stop using fossil fuels, we are a fossil fuel civilization. It's how we fight natural disasters. If you look at Japan, recently there was a tsunami. A tsunami, most of the times before, tsunamis were destroying property in Japan. But last year, end of last year, there was a tsunami, and if you looked at the bridges, they were just vibrating because of technology. So the bridges are made using fossil fuels, be it steel, be it cement or concrete, and plastics. Netherlands. So when I'm talking about fighting natural disasters, I mean the energy and the construction part. So for the Netherlands, more than a third of their land is below sea level. But then people are scaring us about climate change and oceans blowing up, stuff like that. So Spain, Almeria, Spain. So if you go to Almeria, Spain, or if you look at Google Maps, more than 100,000 hectares are under irrigation thanks to fossil fuels. So these are the 4 pillars of modern civilization. Without these 4 pillars, we are a doomed civilization. So we have steel. I guess you all know steel. Steel is like, if you look at Aka, steel, buildings, steel, chairs, steel. Steel is everywhere. So you can't have steel minus fossil fuels. You can't have cement minus fossil fuels. Cement, everybody knows. Like, we wouldn't have these skyscrapers. We wouldn't have story buildings. We wouldn't have modern houses minus cement. Plastics. People make plastics seem as like this devilish product, but then they don't realize plastics saved elephants. Elephants were being killed in Africa because of the property that plastic has that you can't find anywhere else. So somebody puts it very well. There is an energy historian called Vaclav Smil. He puts it very well. So life starts in a maternity that's covered by plastics, from the gloves, syringe, the medicine, and also life ends in ICU covered with plastics, be it the air breathers or stuff like that. So plastics, very crucial. And then we have fertilizer. Fertilizer is very important. Today, like, we wouldn't have more than 4 billion people today if we didn't have nitrogenous fertilizers. And nitrogenous fertilizers are thanks to fossil fuels. So the 4 pillars of modern civilization. And then we have agriculture. Let me talk about agriculture because agriculture is, as they say, Africa is an agricultural center. So 70% of Africans are earning a livelihood from agriculture compared to 2% in the US, and people wonder why Africans can't feed themselves. Because 1 in 5 Africans is hungry, they cannot feed themselves. So if you went back to 1800s, you realize that even in the US, be it Japan, over 80% of their population were in agriculture. And we had so many cases of child labor. So what did change? What changed in those countries? And what changed is fossil fuels, because now we have machines. Machines amplify and expand our capability. Okay, so that is it. So we have machines, point number 2. Machines amplify and expand our capabilities. You cannot even, okay, sometimes you can quantify what a machine can do versus what a man can do, but in other times you cannot. So, and as much as people say, so if you are on Twitter, you're going to see people make points about machines and electrifying machines. That's something that we cannot do at the moment, because even John Deere themselves say, if they were to electrify one of their machines, there is a machine called the 8row machine. If they were to electrify that, so let's say this is the tractor. If they were to electrify that, the batteries themselves are going to be bigger than this 8R machine. So we are not even near electrifying farm machinery. And then irrigation. So because I said like 70% of our people are in agriculture, how are we going to better their lives? It's through access to fossil fuels. And so point number 2 for farm machines and farm mechanization. Let me talk about irrigation. Irrigation is very important as well. So for very many years, the UN has been using Somalia and Sudan as a case study. They're saying, droughts are killing people in Somalia, in Sudan. But if these economies had access to fossil fuels in plenty, they drill boreholes, they desalinate water and irrigate their lands. You can't irrigate minus fossil fuels. You need plastic pipes. The pumps are going to be powered by diesel. The drilling of boreholes is going to be done by machines powered by fossil fuels. So we need irrigation as well. Let me talk about point number 4, value addition. So it turns me crazy when I see statistics like Ghana is generating. So the cocoa producing countries in Africa, they're earning out of the profits earned after selling chocolate. You realize that these countries are getting only 4% of the profits. 4%. And the countries so European countries, they're getting the cocoa, value adding, they get chocolate and sell it globally for Valentine's and stuff like that. And they're taking more than 96% of the profits. So another study is on oil in Nigeria. So Nigeria is producing lots of barrels of oil per day, over 1 million barrels of oil per day. But then they have to export all of this oil to some country. This country is going to refine the oil and then return it back to Nigeria. I don't get it that African countries are getting oil all the way from the Middle East. I don't get it. And we have oil in plenty in Africa. I don't get it. So value adding our products, be it gold, be it whatever resources that we have, is going to change our economies in a big, big way. And now on fertilizer. Fertilizer, as I said, is without fertilizer, we wouldn't have 4 billion people in the world today. And as much as people glorify organic farming, our ancestors were literally starving, and they were practicing organic farming without, fertilizer. And then you can't compare the amount of nitrogen. So nitrogen is a macronutrient for plants. So this micronutrient is very essential, and you realize that something like manure, well-decomposed manure has got about 4% nitrogen compared to urea. Urea now, that's a fossil fuel fertilizer with 46% nitrogen. So at the end of the day, if you have 1 hectare of land, you require 10 tons to 30 tons per hectare for manure, well-decomposed manure. And for urea, you just require 100 kilos. So that's a very big difference. And that fertilizer is going to make a big difference. So there is a point that drives this fertilizer point home very well. So today, African countries are producing on average 2 tons of corn or maize per hectare. That's the same amount of crop production that the US was experiencing in 1800 to 1900 when they did entire fertilizer. Today, in the US, an American farmer is producing 12 tons of corn per hectare. 12 tons compared to 2 tons. So you can see the difference that nitrogenous fertilizer, fungicides, and pesticides, all of these are made using fossil fuels mostly. So agriculture is one of our quickest way out of hunger and poverty, and of course we need fossil fuels. So that's me, and that's about fossil fuel fertilizer. So somebody is going to ask, but what about climate change? Because whatever energy policies that we are implementing right now, they are centered around climate change, because the UN is saying climate change is an existential threat, like a big threat, a threat that's going to end humanity as we know it. That's what they're saying. And right now they're saying global boiling. They are always finding new terminologies to drive climate alarmism and fear. Climate, okay, let me not call it climate porn. So climate change, is it anyway? So the UN with its IPCC, they are saying climate change will be curbed. We should make policies centered around climate change. But point number 1, we are a fossil fuel civilization. We can't do minus fossil fuels from our energy to electricity, because 72% of our electricity is coming from fossil fuels and not solar and wind, as people lie. And then all of these climate change policies are centered around climate modeling, and climate modeling never got it right, because I don't know how many people trust their weather app. Like, if the weather app is telling you it's going to rain tomorrow, maybe okay, maybe it might rain tomorrow. But if it's telling you 2-3 days, it's giving you the weather for 2 or 3 days, are you like, no, it's not going to get it right? So imagine now 30 years of every day, because that's climate. Climate is a weather study for 30 years. So every day. And these climate predictions never got it right. They're always getting it wrong. And then the data says otherwise, be it extreme droughts, flooding, hurricanes, tropical cyclones. All of this, whenever you're watching TV, you're going to see a village in Kenya destroyed by flooding, people dying by droughts. But what they don't tell us is, for the past 3 decades, we have had over 98% less deaths from climate-related disasters. 98%. This is the best time for you and me to be alive. And we can only thank fossil fuels. So for these extreme weather events, droughts, that's I'm going to tell you what the IPCC says. For droughts, it's just flat. It hasn't gone up. For flooding, no good data. For hurricanes, down. Tropical cyclones, down. Wildfires, down. Heat versus cold deaths. That's so they're saying global warming is the problem. But then if you look at it carefully, like if you look at the data says otherwise. It's climate, it's cold that's killing more people. Actually in Africa, because like we are in a tropical zone, you realize that 26,000 people die from extreme heat, 26,000. But the people that die from extreme cold are very many, over 1.2 million people. So you can't even compare. Worldwide, 8 times more people are dying from extreme conditions and not warm conditions. So why are we demonizing global warming? I don't get, and crops love warmth. And then we ignore the climate mastery benefits. A good example is a third of the Netherlands that's under sea level. And then these climate change policies are centered around the wrong reasons, because like, as I said earlier, plastic saved elephants and some sea turtles. Coal saved forests in the UK, be it in China. Polar bears are doing very well despite what mainstream media is saying. And as I said, this is the best time for you and me and our kids to be alive. So the climate change solutions are centered are also centered around climate change. And what the UN is proposing is one, intermittent and reliable parasitic wind and solar. All of the two technologies rely on fossil fuels, be it from mining of the raw materials, transportation, processing, getting the components together, transporting solar and the solar panels and wind turbines to where they're supposed to be built, and also as backup. Like this, so a good example is solar. For solar in Germany, because Germany is one of the big nations that's talking about renewable energy, you realize that solar over there works for 12% of the time. So where are they getting energy, the electricity from? About 88% of the time. Most of the time it's coal. So fossil fuels for backup. And then these two technologies have a low energy density. Most of the solar panels, about 70% of solar panels are manufactured in China, and that's because China is using lots of coal, and coal is very cheap. And then these two technologies are trapping Africans in the Western debt traps. We don't need aid, because like when you're given, we don't produce wind and solar panels and the wind turbines and solar panels. So they're giving the two technologies to us and then in form of a loan. But we have plenty of fossil fuels in Africa. Like we don't need aid. We just need investors to drill our own oil, to mine our own coal. It's so easy. We don't need the aid. And I know my time is almost up, or okay, just briefly. So we have point number 2 for hydrogen, because that's a technology that Germany is preaching to the world, and it was also in the COP28, the recently completed COP28, because they were talking about it a lot. So for green hydrogen, for be it green hydrogen, be it blue or pink hydrogen, at the end of the day, you can't compare the energy density of hydrogen versus, let's say, diesel. So I'm going to give you the figures briefly. So for hydrogen, we have 0.01 watt hours per liter. So 0.01. For batteries, LiPos or lithium polymer, we have about 300 to 700 watt hours per liter. So 0.01, then we have 700. For diesel, we have 10,000 watt hours per liter. That's about 1 million times what hydrogen has. So the countries that are going to pledge to this green hydrogen scam are literally stupid people. Number 3 is sustainable development goals. And there is a big problem with that, because so I know everybody here has heard about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These 16 problems plus climate change, and their solutions are really nice, but then every other solution is centered around climate change. So that's a big problem, because Like it's modern neocolonialism. And so people don't realize that this is the best time for us to be alive, because when you look at the extreme poverty cases, how many people are literate today, child mortality rates, life expectancy. As you know, like today, we have over 8 billion people. Let's say 8 billion people. If you went to 1800s, we had like 1 billion people. So you can't compare. Like, people don't realize our life expectancy has gone up. Like, people don't realize this is the best time for us to be alive, despite what mainstream media is preaching. So what should the Bitcoin community do? I have these 3 points. Now, number one is, and that is the end of it. So number one is energy freedom. We have a country like South Africa that has got plenty of coal. Why can't South Africa use its coal to develop its country? Why should it be forced to use wind and solar? So energy freedom. African countries have got plenty of oil. Why can't we use oil, an energy resource that we have in plenty, to develop our countries, our economies? Number two, advocate for affordable, reliable energy that's not intermittent, energy that's always there whenever we need it, energy that's going to power, versatile energy that's going to power, be it a machine, be it a tractor, be it heating, be it aviation. That's what we need. We don't need energy that's specific. Like electricity is so specific. There are very many things we can't do with electricity, but we can do with diesel. And point number 3 is always focus on human flourishing. If somebody is telling you something, if somebody is giving us solutions as Africans, somebody, let's say the West, is giving us solutions to our problems, they should all be centered around human flourishing, Africans flourishing. And from all of that, I think it's very clear why Africans need fossil fuels. Thank you.
Questions or remarks?
Yeah, just one question. First of all, like, thank you for your talk. Like, it's nice hearing the other side, because like obviously all the Western countries that are preaching this, they got there from fossil fuel. But do you not think like there are a few cases where we can maybe, because we have this blank canvas, like we don't have the infrastructure set up yet, maybe for even like electricity for the grid, use solar as it becomes like, it's becoming a lot more affordable than it was. And I think like obviously like South Africa and stuff like that, we have, you know, the solar like the capacity from our sun like over here compared to Europe to like actually use it in an efficient way. So do you not think it's better like than investing in maybe like coal and stuff like that, which still does have like some damaging effects? Like obviously people living near coal power plants, they get sick from that and sort of that side of things. Do you not think we should use it as an opportunity like to go with solar from the get-go instead of like maybe trying to switch later on as these Western countries are now like trying to do?
Okay, thank you for your question. So, point number 1, I think I have like three points for that, explanation for that. So 3 answers. So number 1, so solar panels, we're getting it's not reliable energy. Point number 1. And as I said, like agriculture is our way out of poverty. So electricity isn't like part of the solution, because there is no way we can electrify our agriculture at the moment. So my solution is, let's solve agriculture first. And how we're going to solve that is by fossil fuels. Let alone the 4 pillars of modern civilization. I'm just talking about energy, the energy bit of it. And then point number 2, so because you mentioned coal actually is cleaner than firewood that we are consuming. It's far cleaner, and we have technologies that make coal burn even more cleaner. Like we can trap the poisonous gases from burning coal and burn it in a more cleaner way. So that's point number 2. And then I think that is it. If the other point is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
No more questions.